Welcome to the Crime Report, where we delve into the darkest corners of real-life mysteries. From unsolved murders to shocking criminal conspiracies, we explore the stories that shook the world. Each episode, we take you step by step through the investigation, uncovering the truth behind the headlines and the secrets that still remain hidden. If you're a fan of crime stories, stay tuned and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Get ready, because we're about to uncover a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The Red Crescent Cartel, Blood on the Streets. Part 1. The Rise of the Red Crescent Cartel. It was the early 2000s when the Red Crescent Cartel began to establish its terrifying grip on the streets of Westwood, a once peaceful city now sinking into the depths of crime. The cartel, led by the elusive figure known only as the Prophet, quickly became known for their brutal tactics and ironclad control over the local drug trade. The Prophet's rise to power was swift and violent. Born into poverty, he had spent years in the underworld, climbing the ranks of various street gangs until he united them under one banner, the Red Crescent. His method was simple yet ruthless. Anyone who refused to bow to him was eliminated. The city's police force had little power to stop the growing empire. Corruption ran deep in the system, and fear ran deeper. The cartel was involved in every aspect of the drug trade, from production to distribution. They controlled shipments from the docks, ran distribution rings in every neighborhood, and even controlled local dealers through extortion and threats of violence. It wasn't just about drugs, it was about dominance. And the Prophet would stop at nothing to ensure his reign continued. But with power comes enemies. As the Red Crescent's influence spread, rival gangs began to make their move. One such group, known as the Black Fangs, had always been a thorn in the cartel's side. They were smaller, less organized, but they had one thing the Red Crescent didn't: a desperate desire for revenge. One fateful night, a member of the Black Fangs, Marcus Hayes, was found dead in an alley, a warning scrawled in blood next to his body. It was a message to anyone daring to challenge the cartel. The murder was public, brutal, and a message to everyone in the city: cross the Red Crescent and you're gone. The murder shocked the city. It was a bold statement, but it was only the beginning. As the weeks went by, more bodies started to appear, each one more violent than the last. Every murder bore the same signature: a brutal execution, followed by a message. The Prophet's dominance was complete, and he knew no mercy. The streets of Westwood were bathed in blood, and no one felt safe. The police were outmatched, unable to keep up with the pace of the cartel's violence. Desperate for answers, Detective Rachel Pierce, a seasoned investigator known for her tenacity, began to dig deeper into the cartel's operations. She was determined to find out who the Prophet was and bring him to justice. But Rachel quickly realized that the investigation wasn't going to be easy. Her every move seemed to be watched, her every conversation monitored. She had heard rumors of corrupt officers within the force, of officials on the cartel's payroll. It seemed like everyone in Westwood was either a victim or an accomplice in the drug trade. With her life at risk, Rachel kept pressing forward, knowing that the truth would lead her into a dark and dangerous place, one she might not survive. The Red Crescent Cartel, Blood on the Streets. Part 2. The Secret War. Detective Rachel Pierce's investigation into the Red Crescent Cartel was beginning to feel like a descent into madness. Every lead seemed to disappear, and the deeper she dug, the more the city's rot came to the surface. Corruption within the police force made it impossible to trust anyone. But there was one thing Rachel knew for certain: the Red Crescent Cartel had a mole in the department, and she had to find out who it was before it was too late. The Prophet was untouchable, or so it seemed. But the more Rachel uncovered, the clearer it became that there was more to the cartel than just drugs and violence. The Prophet's reach extended far beyond the streets of Westwood. They controlled politicians, business owners, and even the media. No one was safe. One night, while reviewing surveillance footage from a recent crime scene, Rachel noticed something unusual. A high-ranking police officer was seen entering a building owned by a known associate of the cartel, just hours before a series of murders were reported. The officer was none other than Sergeant Carlos Rios, someone Rachel had worked with for years. Rachel felt a wave of betrayal crash over her. Rios had always been a friend, a mentor, but now she had undeniable proof that he was involved in something far darker than she ever could have imagined. But she couldn't act on this information yet. She needed to find more evidence to bring him down. As Rachel continued to gather evidence, she found herself growing more paranoid. The Prophet's influence seemed to extend everywhere, and no matter how much she tried to pull on the threads, it felt like they were always a step ahead. She couldn't trust anyone, not even the people she had once considered allies. Meanwhile, the Red Crescent Cartel was stepping up its violence. They weren't just dealing drugs, they were killing anyone who stood in their way, including law enforcement officers. It was clear that the cartel was preparing for war, and the streets of Westwood were going to be the battlefield. A new wave of violence swept through the city as a warning to anyone who dared defy the cartel. Several of Rachel's colleagues were gunned down in broad daylight, leaving the city in a state of shock. Fear ran rampant as the police force scrambled to regain control, but it was clear they were outmatched. Rachel knew that she had to act fast. She reached out to her old informant, a former drug dealer named Tony, who had turned his life around but still had connections within the criminal underworld. Tony had promised to help her take down the cartel, but he made it clear that it would come at a steep price. He met with Rachel in a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of the city, where they could speak in private. As he slid a manila folder across the table, his face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "This isn't Rachel," he whispered. "The Prophet is not who you think he is. He's much more dangerous than you ever imagined." The folder contained a series of documents, business contracts, personal connections, and something far more chilling, a photo of the Prophet standing next to a well-known government official, someone Rachel had seen in the news countless times. The official had been publicly denouncing the cartel, calling for its destruction. But the photo revealed the truth. He was in bed with the cartel all along. This was a game changer. Rachel finally had the evidence she needed to take down both the cartel and the corrupt officials who protected them. But Tony's words lingered in her mind. "Be careful, Rachel. You're not just fighting a cartel now. You're going after the heart of the city. And that's a war you might not win." The Red Crescent Cartel, Blood on the Streets. Part 3, The Final Stand. Detective Rachel Pierce's hands trembled as she reviewed the file Tony had given her. The photo of the Prophet with a high-ranking government official was the final piece of the puzzle she needed. But it was also the most dangerous one. The city was on the edge of chaos, and Rachel knew that taking down the Red Crescent Cartel would put her life and everyone she loved at risk. She had crossed too many lines and ruffled too many feathers. The cartel's power had only grown stronger. The public was in fear, and the police were being picked off one by one. Rachel's colleagues were disappearing, and the streets of Westwood were littered with bodies. The Prophet had made it clear anyone who opposed him would meet a brutal end. But Rachel couldn't turn back now. She was too deep in the investigation, and she had no choice but to finish it. As Rachel set up a meeting with her informant Tony to discuss their next move, she was followed. The paranoia that had been building inside her finally exploded. She was being watched. Every step she took was monitored by the cartel's men. It was only a matter of time before they would come for her. Tony's face was grim as he met her at their usual spot in the back of a rundown diner. "You have to be careful, Rachel," he warned. "They know you're onto them. The Prophet has eyes everywhere. I don't know how much longer we can stay ahead of them." Rachel was determined, though. She had seen what the cartel had done to people. She had seen the bodies. They would stop at nothing to protect their empire, but Rachel knew that if she could expose the corruption at the highest level, the cartel would fall. The plan was set into motion. Rachel would leak the evidence she had gathered to the press. It would be a massive scandal that would tear through the city like wildfire. The government official, the corrupt police officers, and the cartel's operations would all be exposed. The chaos that followed would be their opportunity to strike. But Rachel knew it wouldn't be that simple. The Prophet wouldn't go down without a fight. There was one last piece of the puzzle she had to secure, a ledger that detailed every transaction, every murder, every bribe the cartel had paid. The ledger was hidden in a warehouse, guarded by cartel enforcers. Rachel and Tony had no backup. It was a suicide mission. A rundown warehouse, dimly lit with shadows of armed men standing guard, a steel door half open, revealing stacks of crates and boxes. Rachel and Tony made their way to the warehouse under the cover of night. Every step felt like a countdown to disaster. They had no idea how many cartel enforcers were inside, but they were willing to risk it all. They knew that if they didn't get the ledger, they wouldn't have the leverage they needed to bring down the Prophet. This was the moment of truth. The plan was simple: get in, get the ledger, and get out. But as they crept through the darkened warehouse, something went wrong. They triggered a silent alarm, and before they knew it, they were surrounded. Rachel's heart raced as the sounds of footsteps echoed in the warehouse. She had no choice but to confront the cartel's men. She and Tony were cornered with no way out. The only chance they had was to fight, and fight they did. Shots rang out, breaking the silence of the night. Rachel managed to take down one of the enforcers, but Tony wasn't as lucky. He fell to the ground, clutching his side as blood pooled around him. Rachel screamed his name, but there was no time to mourn. She had to finish what they had started. With the ledger in hand, Rachel made a desperate run for the exit, the sound of gunfire following her every step. She could hear the shouts of the cartel's men behind her, but she didn't look back. She had made it out alive, but barely. Next day, the world changed. The news broke, and the city was rocked to its core. The Prophet's network of corruption was exposed. The government official was arrested, along with dozens of corrupt officers, politicians, and business owners who had been aiding the cartel. But the Prophet, the leader of the Red Crescent Cartel, was nowhere to be found. Rachel had taken down the empire, but the price was steep. Tony had died in the shootout, and Rachel's life would never be the same. She had won, but the victory felt hollow. The city was still broken, and the war between the forces of good and evil raged on. As Rachel walked away from the wreckage, she knew one thing for certain. The Prophet may have fallen, but the Red Crescent Cartel was still out there. And as long as they were around, the streets would never be safe. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more thrilling mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your likes and shares help us grow and bring even more gripping tales to life. Thanks for listening.